When it comes to financial literacy, it is the more time and effort you put into it that you will see the reward. And in today's video, it is a compilation of this entire week's work. So I hope you enjoy it. And I did break it up by chapters. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you for watching. If you're looking to obtain financial freedom, this is the video for you. Now, financial freedom can mean different things to a lot of different people. It could even mean having enough income that is going to be generated or passive income to cover your living expenses without having a traditional 9-to-5 job or a regular paycheck. Now, of course, to get this level of financial freedom, it does take some sacrifices, looking at financial limitations, flexibility, but also security that you're not reliant on the 9-to-5 job. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at 12 ways to achieve the financial freedom that all of us are longing for, starting with our first one, setting financial goals. This, of course, is going to be very, very specific. This is also going to be your motivation when it comes to your financial journey. This is going to be something that you can always go back to, adjust as needed. To do this, we're going to start identifying short-term and long-term goals. When we think of short-term goals, it's about the 1 to 5 year time frame. When you start looking at long-term goals, it's the 5+. Now, of course, long-term goals could be saving down for a down payment on a house. It could be building a retirement fund, funding your child's education. There's a lot of things when you think of financial goals that are very specific. And this is where it breaks it down. And you have to be not only specific, but you have to be realistic with the time frame that you have, regularly reviewing these goals and making adjustments as needed. Because of course, if you're an individual that's making $50,000 a year, if you want to save $1 million in the next 5 years, probably not feasible on your income unless you have something going on. Second one we look at is creating a budget. Now, of course, creating a budget, creating a spending plan, whatever you want to call it, even if you don't track every single item, this is one of the biggest keys that people overlook when it comes to that financial freedom, because when you're tracking income, expenses, savings, living within your means, this is going to allow you to not only eliminate debt, but it is going to allow you to utilize your paycheck or build that passive income that you need, allocating more money towards savings accounts, which of course can generate passive income, but also putting a lot more money into an investments account, which is the big part. Now, when you have an effective budget, listing all the sources of your income, then of course all of your expenses, be very realistic. Don't try to cheat yourself. Don't try to lie to yourself. This is the part where consistently following the budget. And honestly, from my personal experience, when it comes to budgeting, when people are very aware of where they're spending their money and what it is going to, it is super easy to make adjustments once you take the time and effort. And when I mean time and effort, when you think of a 30-day period, once you do this initially, which could take an hour, maybe an hour and a half to get all your documents together, once you have a baseline and budget, you will notice a majority of your fixed expenses do not change at all. You're going to have, of course, some variable expenses, maybe seasonal expenses, but overall for the budget, a lot of it is going to stay the exact same, and a lot of it is going to be very routine. Now, before we get into the next one, guys, please subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments what you guys think about it. So let's get into number 3, paying off high interest debt. This is the absolute biggest detriment when it comes to financial freedom. And honestly, when it comes to finances in general, this will sink everything that you have. When you start getting into credit card debt, when you start looking at 25%, the high interest debt will derail your financial plans, your financial freedom. It really robs the ability to create passive income. It also robs the ability for you to invest because of the credit card debts that you have. Getting this under control, again, is super, super imperative. And really the first thing, when you think of Dave Ramsey's baby steps, when you think of I Can Teach You to Be Rich, regardless of which financial guru you listen to, they always focus on credit card debt and focus on eliminating and not carrying the credit card debt. Now, of course, when it comes to the debt snowball, the debt avalanche, really looking which one is best for you. For me personally, debt avalanche is the way that I do it, making sure that the highest interest rate is knocked out first. Then, of course, we can't do anything without talking about the emergency fund. When it comes to the emergency fund, there will be a point in time where you will have an emergency and you will need this emergency fund. And of course, when it comes to medical bills, car repairs, job loss, this is to keep you out of the high interest debt. This is also to keep you out of borrowing. If you have this money sidelined, it is going to essentially be your safety net that you have. If you don't want to call it an emergency fund, because again, it's kind of old school, but looking to build an emergency fund, you're looking at 3 to 6 months. And honestly, pick a place. If you're looking at your budget and you're aiming to save 3 months, save 3 months. 3 months is going to be the goal. That is going to be the financial goal you're going to set. when you're working towards financial freedom, you are going to work within having that 3 months of savings on the sideline, knowing that it is going to be there when you do need it, in case you do. And trust me, there is going to be a point you do. Now, if you want to get financial freedom, if you want to achieve this pivotal marker of the debt-free journey, it cannot be achieved without saving and investing aggressively. This is something that I don't feel like the aggressiveness has to be so over the top that you're throwing everything into cryptocurrency. But when you think of saving aggressively, most people roughly put about 6% in a 401k. Imagine if that was 10%. Imagine if that was 15%. Imagine if it was 20%. When you think of financial freedom, the ability for you to save faster, invest more is going to be pivotal to really springshot saving aggressively and cutting expenses. You are doing both things. We always talk about the 3 buckets. Number 1 is the income. Number 2 is your expenses. The third bucket is what you have left, whether it is positive or negative. You have whatever is left. With that extra bucket, thinking of almost like the 50, 30, 20, that extra bucket is what you have to do and really what you need to be able to be financially free. When it comes to that final bucket, it gives you the ability to save money, to invest money, to repay debt. You have to make sure, and for a lot of people, unfortunately, there is no third bucket. It is at 0 or it is negative. People are reliant on credit card debt to actually supplement their income. And of course, that is going to be crazy because it is a lose-lose game. There's going to be a point where that money is out. Now, when we talk about investing, we talk about the 3 ETF portfolio, but thinking of your Roth IRAs, your 401ks, trying to max out contributions, putting money into the HSAs. When you think about the different ways, so if you're putting money into a 401k plan, you're maxing out your HSA, you're maxing out your IRAs, you are going to have so much income if you stay on that path for a multitude of years. When it comes to investing it properly, 3-fund ETF, and even honestly, if you put it in the VOO or the S&P 500, you are not going to go wrong with it. Number 6, we get into minding your spending. This is crucial. Now, I took a couple years in really understanding what frugal means. Now, frugal does not mean cheap. Frugal means that you're willing to buy things that have a value. Achieving financial freedom is just like that. It's very, very easy to get into the lifestyle inflation, the lifestyle creep, the keeping up with the Joneses. As your income grows, most people grow with it. They buy the bigger houses, more expensive vacations, more expensive vehicles. It is the practical mindset of spending that is going to lead you to financial freedom and really looking at needs and wants. When I think of a second grader, they were talking about needs and wants. So even going back to the very fundamentals of elementary school, they are talking about the things you need versus the things you want and trying to get them to differentiate between both of those. Now, when you think of this, again, focusing on money and really what it matters to you, it's not going to be the dollar signs. It's not going to be the money in the bank. It's going to be the lifestyle you want. It is going to be the time that you're buying back and the time you don't have to spend at work because you have saved and really mindful when it comes to spending. Now, of course, on the other side, like we talked about with the first bucket, number 7, you can increase your income while you're cutting your expenses. If you can save more money, if you can increase your income, this, of course, is just going to shorten that timeline for financial freedom. Increasing the income will accelerate your progression with the investment aspect. This, of course, looking at raises, looking at promotions, looking at side gigs, like what we have right now. Hope you subscribe to the channel, but we are getting this off the bat, and we are almost to 7,000 subscribers already. But learning a new skill, getting a certificate, and a lot of people even using the same skills they have in a different way outside of work to create a side hustle or a side business, looking at hobbies, looking at passions, looking at ways and exploring how you can monetize that will make a big difference. Now, number 8, planning for retirement. This is one of the biggest parts that I feel people really lack, even if they're investing early. Is it in the right thing? I've seen a lot of people that had money in IRAs, had money into 401ks. That was just in cash. They were sitting at financial institutions with a bunch of different accounts. Those accounts were not invested in anything. And of course, if you want to do the IRA, if you want to do the investing, I have links down below for M1 and Robinhood. Go ahead and look those up, guys. If you want to start investing, and if you're investing in those 401k plans, those IRAs, you have to, I cannot stress it enough, have it invested in the market. It has to be there. It is not going to grow if you're doing a 3%, 5% CD. It is not going to grow to the point you need to. And that compounding interest, of course, is not going to be there because you don't have the interest rate high enough to really make a big difference. You'll see a very, very small growth. And then, of course, when you get ready to retire, you might not have enough funds there. And when we get into number 9, just like we were talking about, investing wisely is the most powerful way to build wealth. When we look at a survey, 88% of millionaires are first generation, meaning the money that they saved, how they hit that millionaire status was what they did here and now. It is achieving that financial freedom. It is about eliminating debt. And honestly, like I said personally, once we eliminated all of our debt, we had the power to put a ton of money into 401k plans, HSAs, IRAs, investment accounts, brokerage accounts, everything. We could really stockpile it. When we start looking though, we have older vehicles. That's okay. There's going to be a point where we are going to have to replace them, and we'll be able to take care of that. Start the education, start the trip down the financial freedom lane right now, looking at the risk, looking at the rewards, and sticking into the investment portfolios and ETFs. That is the only thing that I invest in my entirety is ETFs. I do not follow companies to invest in individual stocks. ETFs for me is the way to go. And I'm glad you're still sticking in for this video, because number 10 is learning about personal finance. Now, when you think of personal finance, this is giving you the tools and empowering you to make better financial decisions, make progression towards the financial freedom, which of course is the goal. Now, looking at this, it could be audiobooks, it could be physical books, YouTube videos, podcasts. There are so many things that are budgeting, investing, retirement. You have to know your sources, and you have to really take it with a grain of salt. I've seen a lot of things on TikTok, seen a lot of things on Facebook that unfortunately the info that I hear really sends off bells and whistles in my head. As a financial counselor, I'm really seeing how it's done and having certifications. As your knowledge grows, you'll know how better to manage your money, but look and be very, very cautious and careful when it comes to get rich quick schemes. When you say, hey, you can do affiliate marketing, it's going to yield you $50,000 a month. Yeah, probably not. I know maybe one, probably not even one of 100 million people actually do hit that number. But overall, guys, investment, wealth, financial freedom is just a steady progression. Number 11, we look at surrounding yourself with like-minded people. This is one of the biggest things when you think about a subconscious or an impact, having financial habits, having a mindset, being very, and really having someone on your side, having someone to motivate you, seeking out friends, mentors, communities that have very similar goals that are pointed in the same direction you are. It's not just in finances though, it is really life. If you have someone in your corner that's really positive, supportive, encouraging, it is going to be an entirely different journey from someone who doesn't. And of course, if you don't want to do any of it, if you want to leave it to the absolute professionals, consider hiring a financial advisor. Now, of course, this journey to financial freedom you can do on your own through the education process, through really going through educating yourself like I did over the last couple years. But of course, if you want to hire someone, be cautious, do your research, do the interview process with financial advisors. They're going to take about 1% of a portfolio, so there is a pretty good cost that does come with financial advisors. So definitely be aware with that. But look for someone who has experience, a multitude of years, trustworthy, really is a fiduciary that is acting in your best interest, and also knows exactly what you want. When you talk about those financial goals, you have to make sure that they align, your goals align with their goals. It is not just about what they can sell you, what they're going to get paid on, and what their commission is looking at and what it looks like, but it ultimately is exactly what you want. Now, of course, when it comes to financial freedom, it can be incredibly difficult if you're not focused like I am to getting to the point. Getting there does require focus. It is setting very clear goals, making very intentional financial decisions, increasing my income that we're doing through YouTube, investing all of the funds that we're getting from there, and of course, planning for retirement like we are. So guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Are you at the point in your life where you're creating stealth wealth? What exactly is it? When you think of the term quiet millionaire, this is a person who really shuns the lifestyle, doesn't brag about the 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure retirement accounts that they have. It's not the individual that is driving the Porsche up to his neck in car payments with debt coming out of his nose. It's the person driving the 2012 Honda Civic, fully paid off, squirreling away money because they know and they've been investing for decades. One of the problems that I see is when it comes to people in debt, the more that you make, for a lot of people, the more they are spending. When you start thinking of earners that are north of $100,000, 54% of those individuals are living paycheck to paycheck. That is the problem that we're going to be dealing with today. And also identifying some of those whispering wealth in America or those stealth millionaires that we see. Now, there's an interesting book, and they quote The Wealthy Barber in here about a barber that gives financial advice, giving haircuts, giving out personal financial advice. A lot of people don't take it. Some people take it with a grain of salt, but some people really do take it to heart. That is the people who are these wealthy millionaires. So when we start thinking of some of the traits that they possess, there are 5 of them specifically that we're going to be looking at. The first one we look at, they are financially literate. That's right. When you think of high school, even going back to the very basics, you learn about calculus. It is trigonometry, all this stuff. However, financial literacy is not taught, and a majority of states do not have financial literacy at all. This means that it is up to you and I to educate these individuals, knowing not only the dangers of debt, but the power of compounding interest, how the market works, looking at the S&P 500, and not overhyping investments that really don't follow a very tried and true basic fundamental when it comes to investing. Now, when you think of the S&P 500, we've talked about the VOO. Even looking at this, it is an annual return north of 10% over the last 20 years, which is kind of crazy. Now, the second one we look at, they live frugal but dress modestly. Now, this is kind of interesting. Valued by Forbes at $140 billion at this time, Warren Buffett could wine and dine, could buy literally pretty much anything that he wanted. However, he doesn't. He clips coupons. He goes to McDonald's. It's kind of crazy to think that, even people that have the money, when you get the mindset, when you get the education, you know the value of a dollar. Every single dollar that you're spending one place cannot be spent at another place. It is taking away from savings, taking away from investing. This, of course, is why, going back to the quiet millionaires, why they are very wealthy. They are penny pinching. They're paying attention to their finances. If they have a way to save money, they're going to do exactly that. It's not buying the $10,000 suits. It's about not following the fashion trends, keeping up with the Joneses, also known as lifestyle creep, knowing the luxuries and really enjoying life versus enjoying stuff. That is one of the biggest things. When I started doing a lot of research when it came to really being frugal and frugality in its entirety, it is about making things and buying things that are of value versus buying a bunch of things that really don't have the value or don't have the quality that you're looking for. Now, number 3, they don't talk about their wealth. This is kind of crazy. When you think about the quiet millionaires, quiet is literally the meaning when we look at the subject, which of course, when you start thinking of wealth, they don't have a lot of conversations about how wealthy they are. They're more like I am in the educational piece of, even though we do have wealth, how do we really translate that into the younger generation? I deal with individuals with financial counseling, 18, 20, 25, 30, even mid 40s. But when you start looking and breaking down their fundamentals down to the nuts and bolts of what's coming in, what's going out, what's they're spending, it is really eye-opening when you start breaking it down to really what exactly is going on with their financial picture. And also it creates a very, very strong sense of accountability when you're talking to individuals really about that. Now, of course, number 4 in this list, they pay for outside counsel. This is one of the biggest things. And I know the Ramsey show, George Kamel, which I love to follow. I love him. Honestly, truth be told, I watch him a lot more than I watch Dave Ramsey. But quiet millionaires are not really financial junkies. When it comes to watching the news, they get it from better sources. This is financial advisors. This is proven records. And when I think of myself personally, it is about hiring and not doing my own taxes. Not having counsel with financial advisors, having a lot of people in my corner that know a lot more and can work with me, can educate me. Really, when you look at the costs, I pay my CPA about $100. For a majority of individuals going through TurboTax, going through a bunch of other avenues, they are doing the exact same thing or very similar. However, they don't have the person for the education. They don't have the person for the advice because essentially it's an AI chatbot or it's someone that you're chatting with on the other end. And the last one we look at, they do not overextend themselves for money. This is one of the biggest things when it comes to quiet millionaires, is knowing that the pursuit of wealth is really the less you have that you have to get with everything else. This is really a big trend that we're seeing in the United States and really worldwide, is the hustle culture. This is the place where you have a job, you're working 9 to 5, you're putting in extra hours, you have a side gig. 54% of Americans have a side hustle at some point. So yet the crushing workload demand, we know a lot of people have gotten laid off, means there is no downtime, or you really have to go in for personal time. It is family time, making sure that you're engaging in your hobbies And of course, it's kind of crazy when you think about the wealth accumulation, because we've talked about this before when it comes to three buckets. Number one, you have your income. If you can build that bucket bigger, if you can make it higher, if you can do a side hustle, if you can go ahead and work more than the other individual, you are going to get ahead. If it's not today, tomorrow, it is going to be a matter of time, which is exactly what we're doing here on YouTube. If you like the content that I'm putting out, definitely subscribe to the channel. But having a hobby like this in the education space and also the financial space, I knew it was going to be incredibly difficult to really do it, but I am in it for the long haul with this. Now, of course, when you think about those quiet millionaires and really understanding the whispering wealth in America, which again is kind of interesting. Let me know how many of these 5 things that you really do exhibit. Me personally, running down this list, number 1, financially literate. This is huge. This is something I educate myself on an absolute daily basis when it comes to financial news, when it comes to really staying on top of everything, understanding compounding interest, even going as far as cryptocurrency, spending a ton of time and effort into understanding exactly how it works, the ins and outs, knowing what is in what funds really to drive in a 3-fund ETF portfolio, living frugal, dress moderately. This is exactly what I do in the professional world when it comes to the investment side, when it comes to the financial industry. Definitely putting a little bit more money into the clothes, knowing they're going to last and knowing that they are going to be there. I'm not wearing suits, ties, all of that. And of course, talking about the wealth. For me personally, like I said, it is about the education aspect that I like to share, how to save money. A lot of people, and it's interesting because when you think big picture, I can put out a video about how to get a side hustle, how to generate more income. We'll see a lot of people watch it. On the flip side, if I talk about, consolidating, budgeting, saving money on the other side, in that really first bucket of income, people don't want to hear it at all. There's nobody that wants to do without. There's nobody that wants to cut back on the liability, on the payments. They want to make more money, work harder, spend more time working to cover what they already have, which unfortunately is kind of counterintuitive. And then of course, paying for outside counsel, I absolutely recommend. And I do not overextend myself for money at all. We have a big bucket that we do invest on a regular basis, meaning that we know the compounding interest and we know the effect. When it comes to our kids and generational wealth, it is absolutely going to be there. So guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know which of these 5 you really do have with the whispering wealth of quiet millionaires in America. And I'll catch you in the next video. You ever feel that no matter what you do, it seems like you're getting deeper in debt? When you're going to school, you're accumulating debt. When you have an emergency, it is more debt. Even when you pay for your house, it is additional debt. When you look at Experian, they said Americans on average have about $100,000 in debt in various forms, according to a survey in 2023. Now, of course, there is a way out of debt, and that is the problem that we're going to be looking at today, how to get out of debt and the common way to pay it off. And personally, the best way that I've used to pay this off. Now, of course, we have the snowball method, we have the avalanche method. We are going to be focusing this video on the avalanche method. Now, the snowball method does kind of seem to be an appeal for a motivation factor, maybe a psychological factor. But when you think of the avalanche method, it is by far mathematically the most logical way to pay it off. And of course, it is going to save you more money. When you think of the elimination of debt, the ability to save more money while you're eliminating debt allows you to pay off the debt much faster. Now, of course, to set it up, when you list out all of your debts, when you're looking at that budget that you built, listing them from the highest APR to the lowest APR. That is right. We are looking at rates. We are not looking at balances on here. We are not looking at payments. We are not looking at anything except the annual percentage rate. The highest rate is going to be the one that we're going to target, and that is going to be the first one and the highest one that we are going to go ahead and knock out. Now, of course, like I said earlier, it might not be the one that is going to be paid off, eliminated the fastest, but putting those extra payments onto that highest APR is going to give you the most bang for your buck. So a simple example of this is, let's say you have 3 credit cards. You have one at 20%, one at 25%, one at 30%. We are going to list that one at 30% first. It is going to be the one that we are going to focus every single dollar on. So what does that mean for the other 2 lower APR cards? We are only going to do the minimum and only the bare minimum on there for the payments. Every single dollar you can save, every single dollar that you have extra, whether it's from the side hustle, working bonus hours, even budgeting, trying to cut your expenses and really live within your means, all of that extra money is going to go right into that highest APR. Because of course, when you're looking at that, you're going to pay it off exponentially faster. And that is the order that we are going to look at when we break it down. Now, when you think about this, paying more money towards that again is going to have a more dollar for dollar impact because you're going to be eliminating debt that is at a much higher rate. And a lot of people don't do this systematically. A lot of people say, okay, I want to pay off my house. What is the driving force? What is really the factor before paying off the house? Or why do you want to pay off the house? If it's at a good interest rate, it might not make the most sense. I also see this with a lot of people that save. They're putting money in, 3, 4, 5% CDs while they're carrying credit card debt, while they're carrying auto loan debt. You really need to systematically think of all of the debt you have in your entirety. And you could do this with everything, even not just above and beyond the credit cards. You could do this with everything to see, again, where you're going to get the most value. So how do we start this? How do we really get it? Taking a note of the debt. This is where you need to know your balances, your APRs, and your minimum payments on those. This is going to be important as we get into these steps. Second one, how much can you afford? What is your commitment based on the budget that you already have, the spending plan? What is the commitment, which what you can put extra on that debt? If it's $20, if it's $50, if it's $100. Now also remember that every other debt you have is only the minimum, is the bare minimum. I don't want you putting a lot of extra money towards your mortgage payment every month when you're sitting on very high APR credit card balances that are just eating away in your budget. Now, of course, we are prioritizing the debts in the highest APR. That is going to be the focus. That is going to be the focus in its entirety. Every extra dollar, every place you can budget, every place that you can squeeze out another $10, $15, $20, you're going to put it towards that highest APR. Once that one is eliminated, you are going to roll it down in a debt avalanche method right to that next one. Now, of course, there are a few additional ways that you can save on this debt. Now, this looks at different options. You can have a really solid start, but you can snowball this or really avalanche it right down a mountain very, very fast when you look at other options to save. Now, some of these include balance transfers. Balance transfers, you could transfer it over to something that is a 0 APR. There's a lot of balance transfer credit cards out there that give you, 12 months, 18 months. You have to do the math. You also have to read the fine print. For a lot of these cards, they do charge a 3%, a 5%. There usually is an upfront fee. So the credit card companies are getting their money up front, but you have to know exactly what it's going to pay and what it is going to be subject to. And also, what is the rate after the promotion has ended? Because you don't want to take a card that's 20%, transfer it to 0%. Then, of course, with the best intentions, you don't pay it off in its entirety. Now it's sitting at 30% versus the 20% with roughly the same balance. Now, of course, you could also look at some of the bigger items in here, like a personal loan. When we think of debt consolidation loans, they run about 8 to 10% as we are sitting in today's market. What that means, again, if you're running a 20, 25%, 30% credit card in there, if you can consolidate multiple bills, putting them into that 10%, even looking at the debt avalanche method, that 10% might be the highest one that you still have, depending on if you have auto loans, which are usually lower, if you have a mortgage, which is usually lower. But that is the point where you're going to focus every single dollar, just like we did in the debit or the credit card scenario. You're going to focus every single dollar right into that 10% APR until you completely eliminate it. Now, if you've gotten to the point where debt is really out of control, the balances on these cards are astronomical. This is where a lot of people, and I don't like the idea at all, but it is one that a lot of people do. And that is going in for like a home equity product. This, of course, you got to be careful with, because not only can it have fees associated with it, is you're putting your home up as collateral. So now at this point of the consolidation of loans, consolidation of that credit card debt, you're putting your home up as collateral, meaning if you're not making that payment on the home equity that you did for debt consolidation, let's say that's due to job loss, let's say you got injured at work, something happened where you couldn't make that home equity payment. Now your home is up as the collateral, meaning the financial institution could take your home in the entirety just because of the credit card debt that you had that you consolidated. So you have to make sure now, of course, When you think of personal loans, when you look at home equity loans, have to be very, very cognizant of the APR that you're going to be paying on there. But you also have to look for origination fees, which a lot of institutions do charge them, and also early termination fees. So a lot of places will charge you a fee upfront. When you do the loan itself, they will charge you a fee on the back end if you pay it off early, which you have to be aware of it because a lot of people do get burned with this. Now, of course, one that you do, of course, have to be very, very careful of is a lot of institutions will do 0%. When you look at like a Best Buy card, if you look at like a Gardner White card, there's a lot of places that will give you 0% for a certain amount of time. Could be 12 months, could be 18, could be 36 months. If it is not paid off in the entirety in that time frame, even though the interest is technically 0% during that time frame, let's say you take it out for 36 months. On that 37th month, if it is not paid off in its entirety, they're going to backdate 3 years of interest on that payment. Again, reading the small fine print is very, very imperative. I have seen a lot of individuals through the financial counseling program that have had Best Buy cards, that have had, furniture purchases, that when the interest came due, and again, when you think of 3 years of interest calculated all into one payment, it was incredible with how much money they would be losing. And of course, they had it at 0% because that is what the offer was. Had to just do the buy now, pay later, which it seems America is absolutely obsessed with. But of course, when it comes to debt and the elimination of debt, you have to get rid of it, guys. It is one of the absolute biggest detrimental things. Not only does it take away your time, that is something that you really have to think about. How many hours do you have to work on a monthly basis just to cover the interest on the loans that you do have? And of course, it takes away your money. When you're paying all that money, it is money that you're not putting into emergency fund. You're not putting into savings, your kids' college funds. You're not putting for retirement. You're not putting on a vacation home. There are a lot of ways. And of course, getting rid of debt in the entirety, once it's gone, you will never want it back in your life. And I'll catch you in the next video. Join me as I dive into Dave Ramsey's advice and see if I can prove why it doesn't work for most people. When it comes to personal finance celebrities, Dave Ramsey is one of the largest names that we have, from going absolutely bankrupt, from having best-selling books, the radio show, and everything else that we have. There is a little bit of controversy with the business practices, but unfortunately for a majority of listeners, it is a lot easier to listen to what he has to say versus the practical application, which is what we're going to be talking about today in the video, why Dave Ramsey's advice doesn't work for everybody. Now, of course, when you start breaking it down systematically, there's a lot of things, and it starts with building on shame. When you start looking at the very basic, the very fundamentals, it is really a practicing of the faith that suits a lot of people with some drawbacks. It is built on you making bad decisions. It is built really on shame and the belief that debt is a shameful thing to have. And of course, it is priority number one to get out of it, to eliminate it, to completely get rid of it. Now, of course, when you start thinking of Christianity, which we're not going to get into, it really says, a lot of the different proverbs and things I know that he does follow to really show you why it is shameful to carry debt. Now, of course, another really big one is a lot of it seems unrealistic. For a majority of people, when you think of the 7 baby steps, some people can follow them, some people cannot at all, and some people, monetary wise, cannot see it at all. So they could find it realistic because when you're on beans and rice, when you don't have money for literally everything, you're giving up every single small pleasure in your life that really can make it, for some people, livable. If you can't afford to pay your monthly bills, some people do have no choice to go in and actually, borrow money, use credit cards. There's a lot of things until you get to a better situation that you have to do that makes some of the things that he talks about really unrealistic, and it can be also misleading. Now, I know Dave Ramsey hates credit cards. We've seen this before. And of course, he advises all of the listeners to never get credit cards. Now, on the flip side of that, when I think of credit cards as a financial counselor, it is a tool. It is not something that is a crutch. It is something that can be very misleading, having a credit card. And if it is managed and if it is utilized properly, it can really be super beneficial for building credit, which I know they talk about is just really being the slave to the man. But earning rewards on those cards can be profitable. Fraud protection on those cards can be profitable. And there's a lot of places that you do have to have them. Some places do not accept debit cards when you're booking hotel rooms. Some of them will only take credit cards as a form of kind of the upfront card that they have on file that they can charge. And again, I've seen this in the financial industry where they will not take debit cards because, of course, you can move all the money from the account. I know with credit cards, you can close out the card, but overall, it is a lot more difficult to do. Now, of course, modern technology is something that is not taken into account. When we think of the 7 baby steps, it seems like it is a very, very old methodology that you can apply to certain situations, but there are some different ways to really make it better. And of course, when you think about this, and he talks about the envelope method, which of course, a lot of the money actually envelope method is no longer used. We know he has the Every Dollar app and a couple other things. And of course, when it comes to grocery bills, when it comes to the expense of things, a lot of people don't want to carry around hundreds of dollars of cash because as of we sit today, most of it is cashless society. And even a lot of places that we went recently will not take cash at all, meaning you're going to have a debit card to go ahead and pay for things, or you're going to have a credit card if you're going to use that route. And of course, making sure, and I do again agree with a lot of things that I have, paying off the credit card in full every single month, not paying interest on that card. Now, I do know that with a credit card, you do have a tendency to spend more, but of course, the justification for that is the rewards, which I do use myself, and I do reap the rewards of a credit card program. Now, when it comes to spending money needlessly, this again is something when you start thinking of investing, and this is a part that I again really don't agree with. When you think of Dave Ramsey, he is a very huge fan of mutual funds. According to him, low risk, high reward, and of course, it doesn't paint the entire picture. Now, he has a lot of financial advisors, which of course does give him a benefit because they charge fees. With the fees that they are charging, it is going to be a very, very big part of a portfolio when you start thinking about 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Mutual funds can be very expensive. And of course, if you do your research looking at EFTs, ETFs, which I go ahead and invest in, they have a very, very low ratio, a low expense ratio. And when you start looking at the performance, most of the ones like the VOO, the S&P 500, when you start looking at 30 or 40 years, they are outperforming almost all of the mutual funds that we do have because they don't have the cost associated with it. But of course, there is some benefit for him when it comes to actually using and selling mutual funds. Now, it provides no application for budgetary education. This is another part where I don't feel like we're really on the same page. So he really talks about not getting or giving out information that is not tailored to everyone. It is more of just kind of blanket size, one size fits all solutions when it comes to the baby steps, which again, when it comes to individual financial situations, I love what he does on the talk show because you can tailor your solutions, you can tailor the conversation in the method that fits the person that is calling. And of course, he is also known and well known for the elimination of debt. When it comes to debt, not all debt is bad. And honestly, when you start thinking of everything but a mortgage, there's a lot of debt that is going to be required, that is going to be considered good debt. And I know he says no debt is good debt, but when you think of, let's say, borrowing money to further your education, really, really important for a lot of people that don't have parents that can fund an education, that can't fund an education themselves while they're working full time, they have no option. When you start looking again, kind of the blanket of never holding debt, when you look at the ability to possibly increase your net worth, significantly enhance your life, get a better job, start a career, for a lot of people, it is going to be about borrowing money. It is about getting those student loans. And of course, this does make a big difference. I know we talked about the emergency fund, which is baby step one, saving that $1,000. Now, of course, this is not going to cover an emergency in its wholehearted. When you think of a fully funded emergency fund, we're talking 3 to 6 months of living expenses saving away. And this is where he focuses on that first $1,000 and then right into debt. Now, of course, if something should happen during that time, you're going to be right back to borrowing in debt because that $1,000 emergency fund for a majority of people is going to be very, very short-lived. I mean, for some people, even thinking of a month, you're going to be well over that $1,000 limit within the first 30 days that there is a job loss or something that is very significant. So of course, I know step number 3 is a lot more practical where you're building up that baby step, but of course it goes into step 2, which is the big, big part of the debt. Now, when you think of the elimination of debt, and again, this is baby step number 2, according to Dave Ramsey, it is about paying off and eliminating debt. However, it never addresses the root cause of debt and what the actual spending problem is. And that's where I see the biggest hurdle within here. It doesn't really understand the psychological impact of spending money and healing what you don't reveal, really understanding from a big picture, from a spending progression. A lot of people that I see want to consolidate, want to pay off credit card debt. We do consolidation loans, we do home equity loans, we consolidate everything right into one nice payment that is definitely affordable. However, we don't address the root cause, which this is the spending problem, the overutilization of credit cards. So most people within the next 3 to 5 years get right back into that credit card debt and right back into the cycling of borrowing again, because again, it doesn't really make sense when you are paying down the credit card debt and using the credit card debt, which a lot of people do because they have to financially, to go ahead and fix that out. Now, he talks about people working harder instead of smarter. This again is a very, very old school mentality. When I was in the service, just thinking about that's the way we do it because that's the way we've always done it. It really takes the ambition out of getting a better job, getting a higher paying job, doing student loans to get probably an education, getting a degree in something that you could earn a lot more money. We don't want them to be, having the mindset that you're going to be working and you're going to be working in the exact same place forever, because that is not the truth if you really want to think about it. And of course, he really preaches and talks about our debt snowball. Debt snowball is a good method, paying that smallest balance first. However, it doesn't take into account what the rate is within there. And of course, looking at the debt avalanche that we've covered before, it is paying off the highest rate to the lower rate, meaning you're going to get more bang for your buck. Again, kind of counterintuitive to what he actually teaches. And when it comes to delaying savings for retirement, this is another one that we're not on the same page. And unfortunately, we don't see kind of eye to eye. So for a lot of people, in thinking about this, he goes on the core belief that you shouldn't start saving money until all the debt is gone. However, if there's a place for a lot of people, and of course, a lot of people are in this exact same boat, that you look 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, debt at that point has never been eliminated. And guess what? 20 years down the road, retirement savings has never begun either. We're not seeing any compounding. We're not seeing no growth. And you've also missed out on 20 years of employer matching and 401k because, of course, if you're putting too much in retirement and not paying off the debt, that can be detrimental. But if you're not putting anything into retirement, I would really advise you to start with at very minimum the company match, then getting into building a little bit of an emergency fund. Then it goes into the elimination of debt for a majority of people. And of course, he talks about the beans and rice. He talks about liquidating everything like it's on fire. Selling assets to pay off debt could be very detrimental when it comes to the big picture. I know it's really good to pay off a house, to pay off a car, to pay off some big ticket items, but the ability to cash out your CDs, your savings accounts, your investments accounts, there can not only be tax implications for it, but you can also lose a lot of gains. Even when you think about investing and when you think about the ability to either pay off your house or invest the money, depending what situation you are, again, we're kind of offering a blanket solution through Dave Ramsey, which doesn't really cater it to everybody's individual concerns and how they manage their money and thinking of what they really need to do. All right, guys, so that is going to do it. As much as I love Dave Ramsey, I support a majority of his teachings. Some of them I feel are kind of outdated, need to revise those 7 baby steps, really sitting them down, revisiting them, bringing them up to really 2024 standards on how people are actually living. Again, on paper, listening to it, reading it, it can make a lot of sense, but putting it into action can be incredibly difficult. So that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Have you ever thought about financial goals and exactly how you plan them? Now, of course, the problem can be when you have multiple financial goals, it can be incredibly difficult to streamline them. And we want to give you a roadmap and really provide an 8-step journey to how and when you should build these financial plans and really coming up with the goals, starting with our first one. And this is kind of, again, a step-by-step roadmap of when you map out these financial goals and when you have multiple financial goals, how you can really achieve that with contributing enough to the employer-sponsored plan to get the match. I stressed this before, even looking at Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps, I would really consider the number one priority, even before you start getting that emergency fund, even to the point of starting to pay off debt, is starting to get the match and getting the match in the entirety. This could be 4%, 5%, 6%. If you're not contributing to your 401k plan and there is a match available, you're giving away free money. You're literally really getting and giving away free money, giving away 100% employer match, which is a guaranteed return when it comes to the employer. Now, of course, if your employer doesn't offer any matching, doesn't offer contributions, you can definitely look at some of the other steps we're going to be going over. But overall, if they are giving you 6% of your salary and they will match it, put in that 6%, because what I see happen, and I've seen this from personal experience, from the financial education, literacy, counseling, everything that I've seen, turning away free money can be very detrimental. But what happens is people start getting into debt, they start getting into credit cards, they start getting into a lot of other places, and twofold, at that point, they are not contributing anything. It might be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road before they get to a point in their life where they have the realization or the wake-up call that they need to start contributing to these 401k plans with the match. And they've already lost, again, at that time, 5 to 20 years of the contribution and the matching, and they have also lost the compounding interest. Now, the second one we look at is paying off high interest debt. This is the credit cards. When you look at credit card debt, it is by far the most expensive thing that you will ever have. Rates for credit cards are running about 25%. America has a total debt of about $1.2 trillion in credit card debt, which is absolutely crazy. So the very big two options for this, again, going back to Dave Ramsey, the debt avalanche and the debt snowball. The debt avalanche is my preferred method. When you start looking, and I'll break down the debt avalanche first, it is the methodology of going from your highest interest rate to your lowest interest rate, and every single dollar goes to that highest interest rate. Everything else gets the minimum payment. This means no additional payments to mortgages, to auto loans, to unsecured loans, unless those are your highest debts that you have in here. And ultimately, once you eliminate and get rid of the credit card debt, I would kind of reestablish what you're looking at paying off. Because again, counterproductive to what Dave Ramsey says, I feel like really tackling even some of the good debt might not be the most beneficial, because you could get a lot more bang for your buck in a couple different places. But the second one is the debt snowball. Now, this, of course, is the preferred method from individuals, but the debt snowball method goes from your lowest balance to your highest balance, focusing and paying down that lowest balance first. This really doesn't give you the most bang for your buck unless by chance that lowest balance is the highest interest rate you have. It is focusing on the smallest debt to pay off first and then systematically going down. Now, psychologically, that snowball for a lot of people does work because you can actually see the elimination of debt. But when it comes to that debt avalanche, you're going to see more bang for your buck and you're going to be getting more money out of there. Now, at this point, once you've eliminated the credit card debt, you've eliminated that high interest debt, this moves into establishing that emergency fund 3 to 6 months. Now, for a majority of people, 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund can vary greatly. I mean, for some people, you could be talking $15,000 at 3 months, $30,000 at 6 months. So how do you determine exactly where you are? For me, general rule of thumb that I use for this is 3 to 6 months is depending on your job. For instance, we can use a couple scenarios in here where if you're the single sole income, if you only have one single income, I would probably lean a lot heavier to the 5 to 6 months of essential living expenses, because you don't have a secondary income. You don't have a supplemental income. If there is a job loss, if there's a medical emergency, if there's something that happens and you are the only income earner, I would lean a lot more towards that 5 to 6 months of having this emergency fund. Now, if you do have two incomes, so you and your spouse, your partner, whoever it may be, does have an income as well, I would probably lean more to the 3 to 4 months of the emergency fund, just for the simple fact that if something should happen, you can shift your finances and there is still income that is being generated within the household. Now, the other thing to remember with this is depending on your career. So if you're in a very seasonal job, if you're in a very sales oriented position, if you're not something where your salary, where your set time, where you're working possibly a lot of overtime, you want to make sure that you're saving probably this 4 to 6 months if you are in kind of more of the seasonal jobs, and making sure that you keep the emergency fund liquid. This is a question I actually got from some viewers that were talking about, could I invest my emergency fund? No, the emergency fund is meant to be liquid. It is meant to keep and be very low risk, very liquid account when you think of interest bearing, because not only with the emergency fund, I wanted to make some money. Looking at your money market accounts, looking at your high yield savings accounts, you want to make sure that you have availability for this, because if Monday it happens and something should go wrong, all of a sudden on Tuesday, you notice the market's down 22% for the year, and boom, you got to pull your emergency fund out of there, meaning you're pulling out 22% less money. That is the reason why we keep the emergency fund liquid. As we get into number 4, maximizing savings to tax advantage retirement accounts and other tax advantage accounts. Now, me personally, when you look at contributions into IRS limit accounts, into 401ks, Roth 401ks, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, really the benefit that I see is going above and beyond that employer match, which we know we already have done in the very, very first step, is looking at this one. There are a couple ways to do this to really maximize it. Now, of course, when it comes to those 401ks, the Roth 401ks, it is going to be dependent on what you have the ability to invest in. Now, this, of course, can be a very slippery slope. You need to do your own research, considering the amount you're putting into the employer match. And if the employer does have the best ETFs, the best funds that are on the market, you've done your research, you know that even the historic performance, which of course cannot be indicative to the future, but overall the funds have performed exceptionally well, you might consider putting more money into that 401k. If unfortunately you're pretty limited, like I am personally in the 401k plan, you might want to look at doing a Roth IRA outside of this. Now the question comes, why do I prefer the Roth versus the traditional? For me, the Roth, when you start looking at it, there's a lot of benefits, including not having to take those required minimum distributions when you get into retirement, and you are paying the tax now. Even though it might be a little bit higher of a tax burden as we sit today, depending on the bracket you're in, is when you start adding in and really calculating the compounding interest. If the compounding is happening in a traditional account, you are going to owe your taxes on the entire balance. If that compounding is happening on a Roth account, you are not going to have to owe the taxes. That is the biggest difference. And of course, to throw another caveat in here, if you have a high deductible healthcare plan, so if you have access to an HSA account, that is a triple tax benefit account. And for me personally, I max this out and we cap this thing every single year, because there's going to be a point when we get to retirement. Guess what? You're going to have medical expenses. And guess what? With the HSA, they are going to be paid for in their entirety. I'm not worried about my Social Security income. I'm not worried about my RMDs that I'm getting out of those 401k plans or those IRAs. I know my health savings plan is already set, and we're trying to get to probably 50 to 70,000 in this HSA account. That way, essentially, we could cover all of our medical expenses when it comes to retirement in general. And guys, before we get into number 5, if you like the content that I'm putting out, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and let's get into the next one. Number 5, we look at saving for a down payment for a house. Now, of course, if you already own your home, if you're already in there, don't even worry about this one. It's time to just skip ahead a little. But of course, you want to make sure the ideal down payment is 20%. If you're going to do less than 20%, you're going to be required to carry what is called PMI, or private mortgage insurance. Private mortgage insurance is insurance that is going to kind of offset if you default on the mortgage because of the equity position that you're in. And of course, if you have that 20% down, you don't have to pay PMI. PMI essentially is paying for nothing, even though I know it's private mortgage insurance. It's to cover, honestly, the bank side if you default on the loan. But overall, you are technically paying for nothing with the PMI insurance, which is unfortunate. Now, of course, when you do get to that 20%, and some are 20, some 22, some 28, putting it down on the house makes a big difference, and PMI can actually be eliminated based on where the house does come in. Now, general rule of thumb, when it comes to a down payment of the house, 28% of your gross income in its entirety. You have to remember, when you're buying a house, you have principal, you have insurance, you have property taxes, and you have interest that you're going to be paying on the loan, meaning you're looking at the out the door total monthly payment for the property should not exceed, by no means, 28% of your income. People that I've seen at 30, 35, 40, even 50% of the income are literally house poor for the rest of their life because they have allocated such a big part of their income into that home. Number 6, pay down tax deductible or high interest debt. This, of course, is going to be the point when you start tackling everything else. This is going to include mortgages, student loans, home equity line of credits. This is going to be your car loans. This is going to be anything, honestly, that is probably at a 4 to 6% or higher in a rate. This is the point we've already invested. We did the match. We got the HSA, we're putting in 401ks, we've already eliminated all of our credit card debt. This is the point that you're going to be paying down a lot of other taxes. And of course, you want to make sure that you do this systematically, because if you're paying down a mortgage that could be a tax deduction versus a student loan that isn't a tax deduction, it could make a big difference depending on your tax guy. And of course, seek skilled tax advice when you're looking at those. Now, of course, when you start looking at the elimination of debt, as soon as you get the student loans gone, focus on home equities, focus on the unsecured loan, focus on the vehicles. The faster those are gone, the less you're paying in interest, period. Even if you're looking at an auto loan and if you're at 6.5%, which is pretty average for today, once you get that gone, that frees up hundreds, if not for some people, thousands of dollars a month that you can allocate somewhere else and keep putting it into other investment accounts. As we get into number 7, saving for your child's education. This point, again, if you don't have children, don't plan to have children, go ahead and skip this part because it's not going to be prevalent to you. But child's education is still a very important policy. A lot of people want to go ahead and just have their kids take out student loans. It continues with the debt cycle. Guys, if your kids are going to school and they're taking out student loans, let's say, they graduate 22, 24 years old, they're sitting on $100,000 in debt. They're going to spend the next 10 years of their life trying to repay that debt and running 10 years of interest in there. That is the reason why we use the 33%. What we mean by this is 33% comes from scholarships, grants, comes from money that is generated for a child's education. 33% is in student loans. So if they do have to take student loans, they do. And 33% of that child's education comes from the savings from the parents, grandparents, whoever it is, but really the designated. Make sure that the money, when you look at everything in here, your 401k, those IRA accounts, those Roth IRAs, your 529 plans, when it comes to education, everything needs to be invested in the market. You have to be making a better return than we're seeing with inflation, because unfortunately, if that's not the case, you're losing money by investing in these accounts. And of course, once all this is said and done, when it comes to the 8 financial goals, last one is continue to invest. So you've gotten rid of the high interest debt. We got rid of and built the emergency fund, got rid and maxed out the retirement accounts. The HSA is going, child's education is going. Guess what? Now you have a ton of money to put towards your goals. Continuing to stockpile, and it's going to make a difference really for the rest of your life and also for your kids' life. If you do have them, creating generational wealth can start all by starting and saving up for multiple financial goals. So, all right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next video.